Hi, this is Jim from RV4x40.com. We're going to talk today about sanitizing our water system. Hang on and we'll show you how to do it. Usually in a sticks and bricks home, you're not too worried about the purity of your water, although if you're on a well system that can be a real issue, and at times even city water can become contaminated due to water main breaks and other issues like that, and you'll get a boil water notice. We are full-time in the RV, and much of our time is spent hooked up to campground water. I won't say city water because it may or may not be from a city water system. Campgrounds often have their own well water system depending on where they're located, but we don't worry too much about the water because usually it's been treated or at least tested for purity and it's okay to use. However, it is a system which is self-contained. There's a water tank, a storage tank, which is used to hold water when you don't have any other access to it, and so that tank can become contaminated with time. The water system, if you're on a city water or treated water system, has probably got chlorine coming into it, and that'll help keep your own system sanitized. But it's a good idea on a regular basis to sanitize that holding tank in particular. And one of the things about being full-time in the motorhome is it's hard to do that and be down without water for any extended period of time. A lot of the procedures I have found online recommend something like a 12-hour time to let the water sit in the tank. And that's impractical to have everything turned off for us if we're in the motorhome, to have it down for 12 hours. And other situations, it's recommended that in part of the sanitizing process you be able to drive the motorhome. That is a great idea if you're able to do it. It often does not work out well with our travel plans and when we can get to it, and it's one more complicating factor if we're trying to drive also to deal with sanitizing the system. So what I'm going to show you today is a system that we've developed that I think works effectively. It's a shorter dwell time, but it still uses chlorine bleach as the main agent to sanitize things. And I'll show you how we go through that. One of the things I did find in doing some research is, first of all, with all the COVID sanitization stuff that's going around, the recommendation for a chlorine solution to sanitize a surface is simply to spray it on and let it sit for 5 minutes. That can be an issue with some surfaces if they react to the chlorine, but as far as the sanitizing process is concerned, that seems to be an adequate time. So we're going to actually use a 2-hour dwell time in the tank when we get that far, and we'll show you what it's all about. And of course we have several faucets around. This is the kitchen sink, so we've got there's the cold water side to it, the hot water side to it, of course, and in our case we also have a spray nozzle. You want to make sure we're going to eventually get the sanitizing solution through all those, plus the sinks in the bathrooms, and make sure we get everything with a chlorine solution into it for at least 5 minutes. Longer is good, but 5 minutes should be sufficient as long as the chlorine is strong enough. We're going to need a bucket or a pitcher of some kind. You want somewhere around a gallon of water, maybe a little bit more. You're going to dilute the chlorine bleach before you put it into the tank. Also, you might want to think about eye protection and rubber gloves for your hands while you're doing this. In our case, we have a 90-gallon tank. The recommended concentration is a 1/4 cup of chlorine bleach for every 15 gallons in your fresh water tank. So we're going to measure out a 1.5 cups of chlorine bleach poured into some water which is already in the bucket. And you can use a bucket like this, or you can use a pitcher, but you want at least a gallon or so of water. One of the things to make sure of is how much water you have in the freshwater tank. We've got over 1/3, so it's between 1/3 and 2/3. That's all we really know. It's this gauge right there. And so you want to have a fair amount of room in that tank to be able to add the water, because that's going to help slosh around the mixture you put in and dilute it throughout the water tank. If it's too full, you just simply drain some of the water out of your freshwater tank to start with. Now, because I don't have a funnel that has a flexible spout on it, there's no way to pour water into my freshwater tank. But this little electric drill operated pump is a great device. It's useful for all kinds of things. And it will just take me a few minutes to pump a gallon or two of water out of that bucket into my freshwater tank. So that's good. And the battery just ran out of the drill, so we'll stop while we put a fresh battery on the drill. And that is why it pays to have more than one battery for your electric drill. When I'm all done, I'll rinse this system out with some clear water just to get the chlorine water out of the tubing that goes with my drill. Now, I'm sure you can't see this on the camera because it's not down low enough, but the next step is going to be to fill the water tank. So we're going to go here, and this is the tank fill there. So we're off of city water, and we're using the hose to put more water into the tank. We're going to let that run until the tank is completely full. And this is how you know when you've got the tank full. There's an overflow, and it will start overflowing. So now it's time to turn the water off. And now that the water is turned off, we're going to let this sit for a couple of hours. You can let it sit for longer, but really that should be more than enough time for the chlorine to do its job in the tank. It would be ideal to drive the coach at this point, or the RV at this point, but it's not something we're set up to do today, and so we're going to just let it sit. At the end of the 2 hours, then we're going to flush all the interior drains out and let the chlorine sit there for a few minutes, and that'll take care of our sanitation job. We've let the chlorine in the water sit in the freshwater tank, which is full, for about 2 hours, and turned the city water off, and so we're now on the pump. So we'll be pumping that water out of all of the faucets, and we'll do that. The hot water heater is bypassed, and we're going to let that run long enough to start to smell the chlorine coming out of the water. That's the cold water side. We'll repeat that on the hot water side, and the other sinks that are here, we'll do the same thing with all of them. So we'll get the chlorine water into the system and start to smell it there. Get the chlorine water into the system, and then let that sit for really only a few minutes, because that's a fairly small contact area, and should be done very quickly. All right, we're going to finish up now, and we need to flush the lines out, all the water faucets that have the chlorine in the tubing going to it. We've turned the water back on for the city water supply, and the pump is turned off, and we are letting the freshwater tank drain, get rid of all that chlorine water that's in there. It's 90 gallons of water to go out, but it's not a lot of water, but considering we don't use much water by comparison to a home anyway. So we'll finish up. This is part of it, to just simply flush all of these lines back out, and at that point we're pretty well done. So thanks for watching today. We appreciate that. Hope you've got something useful out of this for how to sanitize the system while you still live in the motorhome full-time. So if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, we'd appreciate it if you would do that. Our goal is to give you useful information about being in an RV and kind of what it takes to live full-time in an RV, and give you some information about that. And we hope you find these videos useful. See you again next week.